This short film is demonstrating how to print a colour linocut using a method called reduction printing and using a device that I sell in my shop. Reduction printing with lino is a system whereby an entire print is created from one piece of lino. Every time a layer of colour is printed, more of the lino is cut away. So by destroying the lino block, you create a colour print. The important part of reduction printing is to make sure that every layer of colour lines up one on top of the other to create a sharp finished image. My registration device allows you to line the paper up exactly with the lino at every printing stage so that the end result is a nice, sharp, focused picture. This is the registration device that we've devised based on the system that I have in my printing press in my studio. As you can see, it's made of MDF. It has on the back of it a hook to put it on the edge of the table. It's very important to keep it nice and stable. It has a frame that opens up like this, and I'll show you how to attach paper to that in a moment. The inside of the device will hold your lino. This piece of lino here is attached to another bit of MDF, and as you can see, the MDF slips into the frame and is held firm. This bit of lino I've stuck to the MDF permanently, and I've used a cork floor adhesive from a DIY shop. Anything that will stick down carpet tiles or cork flooring will do. If you don't want to stick your lino down permanently, then I would suggest you use a double-sided carpet tape or something similar just to hold it in place. So I have my lino on my board, and that's going to fit into my device. As a safety measure, I'm going to put an arrow on the board pointing towards the hinge. You're going to be using this device to print several layers of colour, and it's awfully easy to put it in the wrong way around by mistake between layers, which of course will wreck your print. To start printing, the first thing you need to do is take the lino out of the way and get your paper set up. So I'm going to pop the lino to one side and bring back the frame of the device, and you'll see there are markings all the way around the device here. I'm going to take my piece of paper, and the first thing I'm going to do is to line it up with the line that runs down here. It doesn't have to be particularly accurate because we're going to make it very accurate by using the other marks around the frame. So I've got some masking tape, and I'm going to pop a couple of pieces on at the opposite end to the hinge just to hold the paper in place. I'm going to leave that masking tape on throughout the printing process because we're going to have to stick this paper back down again when we do other layers of printing. So I'm going to take a pencil and I'm going to start matching the lines on the registration device onto the back of my paper. And this is a really important step. If you forget to do it, then you're sunk because you can't line your paper up the next time. But it's also worth remembering that the more accurately you do this, the more accurate your registration and the better your print will be aligned. So just take the time to do it carefully and to make marks all the way around your paper. That way, when you come to put this back on, when you come to print the next layer, you'll be able to line up exactly so that your paper is in precisely the right place for your next layer of printing. The next phase of the procedure is inking up. The ink that I'm using here is a water-based ink. I use both water-based and oil-based inks in my printing, and you can use either. And what I'm looking for when I'm rolling out my ink is a nice suedey layer of ink rather than a heavy, blotchy, soapy layer of ink. So once you've got a nice even surface, and you can hear it makes a sort of slightly sticky noise, you can start inking up your lino. So take your time over this, don't rush it, and don't be too keen on loading a lot of ink on to begin with. Just build up the layer so that you have a nice, smooth surface of ink. So you can see, it's taking me some time to do this, but we're nearly there. And it's a good idea if you just tilt the roller slightly when you're doing the edges of the lino, just to make sure that you get right into those edges and corners so that you've got a nice consistent layer. If, like I've just done, you get a little bit of ink on the MDF. That doesn't matter at all because it's not going to be anywhere near the paper, so it won't print. So I'm just making sure that I've got a nice coverage. And when you've inked up, you should have a nice surface over the entire piece of lino. To take the actual print, the first thing to do is to take the paper out of the way by opening the device, and then pop your lino into place, paying attention to your arrow so you know which way around to put it, and then bring back the paper on top. Now I'm going to burnish the back of the paper with two devices. This device is called a baron, and it originally came from Japan for printing Japanese wood blocks, but it's readily available from art shops in the UK, and this is going to give me a nice general pressure over the whole block. The other thing that I use is a spoon, and that gives me hard pressure that I can direct into small places, so this is great for catching down bits that haven't printed well. So when you use your baron, it's a good idea. You're going to need to use some force, but don't scrub at it because you can push the paper off the lino block. So a downwards force. So you see how I'm holding it, fingers through the handle, and I'm bringing my whole hand down. I'm not holding it by the handle, I'm pushing my fingers through, and that way you've got the strength of your arm and it's a nice stable even weight. So I'm going to begin working my way over the print using plenty of force and little circles as I work my way around to get a good even pressure. I'm now going to rub back and forth. And I'm not aiming at getting the entire print perfect because I know I'm going to have to go in there with a spoon and print as well and do some rubbing. So now I've done that, I'm going to take my spoon, finger in the bowl to give myself some control, and then I'm just going to make sure that I catch down the edges of my print. And I'm just working my way around. As with most printmaking, the calmer and the more methodical you are, the better the result. So just take your time. Even though this is water-based ink, it will stay open for a fair length of time, so you've got plenty of time to take some trouble with your printing. The other thing that you can do with this device is to have a little peep at how progress is going and check how things are printing. So just peel it back, have a look, and if you can see an area that's missing detail, then just work in there with the spoon until you're happy with the result that you're getting. When you're happy that you have rubbed the back of your paper sufficiently to get a good impression for your print, all you need to do next is to peel it off and put it to dry. It's important that it dries before you put the next layer of ink on. The other thing to remember is that reduction printing means destroying the block as you're creating the print, because to create the next layer of colour I'm going to cut more of this block away. So it's very important that you start with plenty of prints so that by the end of it you have a nice collection of prints. You can't decide halfway through that you'd like more prints and be able to do that because your block is going to be destroyed during the process. So do allow a couple of extras for mistakes as well along the way. When you've taken enough prints, you need to clean your lino off before you start cutting the next layer. So simply remove it from the device, and always make sure that you put your device well out of the way when you're cleaning, because you want this to stay as clean as possible. I'm using water-based ink, and all I need to do is to wipe the lino with a damp cloth. Never get the MDF wet, because the MDF will swell if it gets any water on it. You also don't want to get your lino very wet either. So it's more a case of elbow grease than lots of water, and you can see simply a wet cloth rubbed over the surface will take the ink off. And then always make sure that you dry your lino thoroughly afterwards. Certainly needs to be dry before you put the next layer of ink on it. So now I've wiped and dried the piece of lino, I need to cut away for the next layer of printing. The thing to remember is that anything that you cut away from your lino after you've printed will stay the same colour that you've just printed. So everything that I want to be green, I now have to cut out of this block before I put my next layer of colour on. When you finish cutting and you've taken out all the lino that you want, do make sure that you give your block a good clean to get rid of all the little tiny bits of lino. If you have crumbs of lino left in there, when you roll her over with the ink, the lino crumbs will stick to the roller and you'll get a very uneven print. So make sure you have a good clean down before you start the next stage. So I'm going to put the next layer of ink onto my print, so I need to reposition the pieces of paper. The easiest way I've found to do this is to begin by lining up the 3 marks at the top of the piece of paper, and then I use my hand, my thumb here as a sort of pivot to work out where to line up the other marks. And it is well worth taking your time over this, because if you don't get it exactly right, there'll be a slight offset to your print and it won't be as sharp as you might like it. So I'm just taking my time to make sure that all those marks around the paper align. Now that I've printed my red layer, I've again cleaned off my lino. You may find when you clean it off that you get little bits of ink left in the cutout spaces. Don't worry about that. As long as the block is dry, it will print fine. So for my final layer for this print, I'm going to now decide which bits of this image I want to stay red and which bits I want to print as black ink, which is my final colour. So now I'm going to cut the final part of the print, and the next colour printing will be the last layer. So now I've cut my lino for the final layer of printing. I just have to reposition my print once again, and it's exactly the same as before. Just take your time and make sure that you've got it lined up exactly where you want it before you start printing. So now I'm going to put my black inked lino back into the device, remembering to put it in the direction of the arrow. And you can see now all that's left is really line detail, as I've cut away everything that I wanted to be red and green, and we're left with black. So that goes into there. And there you have the final print. And as you can see, the job of the device is to hold everything in place so that each layer is lying one on top of the other and you don't lose detail. You can see how the white lines around the frame are still white. And this makes for a lovely crisp lino cut. And as you can see, I've just done this at my kitchen table without a printing press, so there's no reason why you can't work on this at home. If you want one of these devices, you can buy them from my shop at my website, and if you'd like to come along to a class and learn a bit more about reduction lino printing, then go to my website where all my classes and courses are listed.